Thank you very much, Omar. It's always a pleasure to be with you, and it's always a pleasure to be in Istanbul and with the Sharq Forum, which I really deeply thank for all the efforts and the various activities that they do. Look, I'll try to, in fact, take the opportunity of this first presentation in order to, let's say, put the framework, the conceptual framework of this issue of armed non-state actors in 2 or 3 points. My first point would be about mainly the historicity of it and its genealogy. We tend to think, or we tend to consider or believe that non-state actors are something new, a new phenomenon in the Arab world. Although, in fact, it's not very true. They have already a long history without entering into all times, but as starting off, with the 40s and the 50s, you already have non-state actors in the region. Now, what has changed is probably something we will probably discuss in a while, their relation with the state and also their scope and their programmatic, let's say, profile. But there were non-state actors. For example, the PLO was one of the most prominent and the first non-state actors in the region. The FLN in Algeria, the National Liberation Front in Algeria was a non-state actor. These non-state actors, the first wave, let's say, the first generation of non-state actors, were mainly liberation movements / guerrilla movements that were in fact very statist, that they were very state-oriented on both sides. First of all, they were aiming to establish a state or to take over a state or to create a state. And second, they were tied to a state apparatus in a way or another. Then you have the second wave of non-state actors that are more resemblant to what Hezbollah has become, maybe to the Taliban movement or etc. So they are in fact non-state actors created by states or inspired and helped by state. Hezbollah is created by the nexus of Iranian and Syrian strategy in the region in the aftermath of the Israeli invasion of Lebanon in 1982, but they become a non-state actor that has an existence of its own. And then you have the third wave, which is today what is on the radar, occupying most, the biggest space on the radar, organizations like Al-Qaeda or ISIS or others that are completely non-state actors, that are completely spontaneous, faceless. It's very difficult to know exactly their organization and etc. For example, if you compare with the PLO or others, PLO has a very identified figure, Yasser Arafat Abu Ammar. We knew where he was sitting, we knew his phone number, we knew his fax number, whereby today Al-Qaeda or ISIS are completely aterritorialized non-state actors. This is the first point. The second one, I won't get too much into it because probably my neighbor on the right will get into it. Non-state actors tell us also a lot about the state nature, in background or in contradiction. And here I think very quickly to put the distinction, I already talked about it, you have what I would call state non-state actors and non-state actors, i.e. State non-state actors that are more or less nationalistic in orientation. They are non-state actors, but they are confined in organization and in scope, in aim, within a state boundary. And you have non-state actors that are globalized in nature, in recruitment, in organization, in networking, and etc. And also non-statist in their goal, aim, scope, and etc. Global jihadism, etc., etc. So this is also the second, let's say, nuance. With something interesting in the Arab world, and probably Bashir will talk about it, you have increasingly, and maybe I'm impacted by my Lebanese experience, you have something which is very fascinating, a kind of drift of non-state actors becoming more and more statist in nature, like Hezbollah, which is becoming a state, in fact, in a parallel state, and the Lebanese state, which is becoming increasingly a non-state state, in fact. So you have this kind of chiasm between state and non-state actors, each one replacing the other in its performance. Now, the third point, which is, I think, very important, is this question of identity politics. How far and probably people on the left of the panel will talk about that, how far non-state actors are rooted in identity politics. I tend to believe that this is a consequence and not a cause, i.e. non-state actors don't start as identity-driven actors, they are mainly political actors, but the mode of recruitment, mobilization, and action drives them towards something like identity politics. Here I take the example of Hezbollah and other Iranian proxies in the war of Syria. When Hezbollah entered the war of Syria, it entered it for geopolitical reasons. But while you have to recruit for that, while you have to mobilize for that, the discourse you use, the software you use, and Hassan Nasrallah used it starting, starting with probably 2012, 2013, is becoming more and more sectarian in order to recruit, mobilize, and etc., using the Takfiri theme, even sometimes millenarist thematics like the return of the Mahdi, and etc. And so these movements become sectarian, become identity-driven with time and for matters of mobilization. We can get back to that in the Q&A. The last point, and the first point, which is also very interesting, is the future of these non-state actors, i.e. the question of their integration or not, the degree of not of their statehoodness with time. How to cope with these organizations, how to deal with them. Here, the comparative examples are very interesting, for example, with Ireland and elsewhere, South Africa maybe, in other parts of the world. And here again, I will take as a pattern and stop at this point, the example of Hezbollah, which is very interesting. In fact, if you look at the trajectory of Hezbollah starting, after 82, 85, the conception, the inception, and today, you have the gradation and the transformation or the passing of Hezbollah from a movement that is against the state, then a movement after the Ta'if agreement, which is in parallel of the state, with more or less an acquiescence of the state, and then a movement that is above the state after 2005, the killing of Rafiq Hariri and etc. And today, probably the drifting of Hezbollah towards something that is a movement which is the state, or which is completely confused with the state. And I think that this kind of fluidity is something important. I don't want to talk about Hezbollah per se, but just to say that these movements are fluid in nature, their relation with the state is fluid in nature, and it's important to apprehend them in a dynamic way and not only in a static way. I'll stop at this point.